at Fairfield University. By encouraging dialogue, communication, community partnerships, and a culture around diversity, equity, and inclusion, we foster in our students, faculty, and staff the capacity and desire to build a better world. We are committed to diversity in action. Thank you for joining us as we have a series of programs and initiatives called STAG Diversity in Action. Today's topic is Walking with the Marginalized Part 2, supporting our LGBTQ plus students. I would like to introduce two great colleagues of mine who have been very pivotal in this work with supporting students and faculty members and the entire Fairfield community. First, I would like to introduce Erica Hartwell, Associate Professor of Marriage and Family Therapy and the Director of Sexual and Gender Minority Mental Health. How's it going, Erica? Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, PJ.
And then secondly, man, my companion when it comes to doing great work with campus ministry. Whenever I need a prayer, I call Kevin. But Kevin is actually the campus minister for domestic and international immersion. Kevin, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, PJ. Thanks for having me.
So with that said, we just want to start off getting to know a little bit about both of you all. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourselves and where you're from, your hometown, and, maybe something that people wouldn't know by just looking at you all?
You want to fight over who goes first?
Yes, you do.
Okay, great. So I actually grew up in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Not far from here. I've lived all over the Northeast. I lived in Ohio, as we were discussing earlier. I lived in the south of France for a while.
Yes,
Oui, yeah. So the nice thing about being here in Fairfield for me is being close to my family, but not too close. And something you wouldn't know by looking at me is 2 weeks ago, I jumped out of an airplane for the first time.
Whoa.
Yes.
Adventurous.
Yeah. Fortunately, there was this very cool dude named John strapped to my back. He's done it like 15,000 times.
Awesome.
So I let him take the lead.
Great.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Highly recommend.
Great. Kev.
So I've been saying that I'm from Regis Hall because this year marks, I believe, my fourth year living in Regis Hall, which is the longest I've lived in the same place since I was 15.
Wow.
Man.
So
That's
it's wild to
exciting.
me. So I've been saying I'm from Regis, but I grew up in New York, not far, like Erica. This is coming to Fairfield was a sort of coming home and close to my mom and my sister in New York. I have lived maybe less places than Erica, but have been all over since college in Massachusetts. I did the Jesuit Volunteer Corps out in Detroit for a year, lived in New York for grad school, and then down to D.C., and then back here to Fairfield. I was trying to think of something cooler than jumping out of an airplane, and obviously could not.
Yeah, you shouldn't have made me go first.
Yeah. One thing I will say, one of the coolest jobs I've had that people don't often know, and I've been talking about it a lot recently, I was a national park ranger.
Oh.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Man.
Where?
Big hat and everything. Queens.
Okay. So out in the wild,
Ooh,
huh?
man.
In the wild.
How did you survive?
I'm very indoorsy, as I like to say. So Rockaway Beach in Queens is about where I can survive as a national park ranger.
Park ranger. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there lions and tigers and bears in Queens?
Oh, my.
There aren't. There's like heat. And that's about it.
Great.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you all for sharing that. When it comes to this work that we're talking about today, can you just share, how did you get involved and what inspires you to begin supporting folks within the LGBT community?
I'll start again, Kevin.
Sure.
That's a long journey over here. But I would say, so my professional training is as a marriage and family therapist. So I've been trained as a therapist in mental health and from a social justice perspective for a long time. But I would say when I really dove in and became really passionate and focused on LGBTQ mental health and well-being was in my doctoral program at Ohio State.
Okay.
I worked in a research lab that we were working on several different federally funded research projects that were, focused on mental health and physical health in the queer community. And it was just a lab filled with undergrads and grad students and researchers and faculty, most of whom were, LGBTQ identified in some way, and all who are passionate about this work. And I just really saw, I think, the broad spectrum of the work that could be done, and the work that needed to be done. And, throughout my professional development and career, both as a therapist and as an academic, I've just noticed the gaps in our inclusion of and attention to LGBTQ people and experiences. So it's something that I've just felt inspired to do and found my niche there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Erica. Kevin.
I started, so I'm a campus minister. So I went to school for theology, grad school for theology. And I first was introduced to queer theology in my first year of grad school.
Okay.
And I didn't really take to it necessarily, but it always was kind of in the back of my brain, especially going on to be, to work in Catholic schools, Jesuit schools, beyond grad school. Really moved by the theology of queer theology, which is a whole nother podcast. But moved by what I understand to be the message of Jesus, which breaks down hierarchical boundaries between people, which I've always just kind of felt intuitively, and then to hear it expressed in queer theology was really beautiful. Queer theology kind of moves beyond gay is good, right? Trying to convince Christians that gay is good, and into this sphere of queer folks have their own theology to offer the Christian community. But being here at Fairfield, coming into campus ministry, I realized early on there wasn't an established relationship between our students in what was then Fairfield Alliance and campus ministry. So I worked hard to convince students to come with me to Ignatian Q, which was, if you'll recall, which is a conference for queer students on Jesuit college campuses. And from that relationship, I've worked with GSA now for 4 years. And really in the last, I'd say 2 years, devoted a lot of energy to queer mental health, starting my doctorate in queer spirituality, and finally, after 4 years, being an official advisor to GSA.
Awesome. That's great. Well, Kevin, thank you for sharing that. Erica, do you mind just discussing, some of the work that you've done to continue supporting students within the LGBTQ plus community?
Sure. Something that we've been working on recently, Kevin and I, with you, PJ, which has been really a treat, is to, I think, revitalize some of the initiatives that have existed on campus to support our LGBTQ students, but have maybe faded away or are not serving the needs in the way we'd want. So one of the things we're working on is the safe space training. So how to train faculty, staff, and students around campus to be safe spaces for our LGBTQ students. And by that, I mean to provide a positive, encouraging, welcoming space, for somebody to just share their experiences or talk about their identities or their struggles. And so we've been revising that and offering that a few times now, which I think has gone well, and I'm looking forward to doing that again. And I think that's an important conversation to have, because it's not a conversation, sadly, that's just inherently a part of our daily conversations, right? It's something we have to intentionally include. And so we talk about language, and we talk about the gender binary system and how that creates stigma and oppression, and how that creates the need for so many labels and identities in the alphabet soup, right, of LGBTQI, PPAA, 2. So we're working on that, and that is, that's kind of my jam. I love training. I love teaching people. So I'm super excited to be doing that. I've also been, just in the last year, creating a virtual gathering space for LGBTQ faculty and staff. to just sort of come together and create community and talk about our experiences. And often what comes up in those spaces is how we can support students. So our faculty here and staff here are very passionate about that, which is always exciting.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I must say I attended one of your safe space trainings, and it was amazing. You and I believe Jay Taylor did a great job. He's an associate professor here?
He wishes. No,
Oh my gosh. Jay, we love you.
I do love Jay. I love training with him. I feel like we have a really good rapport. He is the field director of our MSW program.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, again, it was amazing. I honestly, I think for folks that are in the Fairfield University community, if you have not attended a safe space training, please do. Please do. So, Kevin, would you like to add to some of the work that you're doing? I know you mentioned some of the things already, but is there anything else you'd like to add with some of the work?
Sure. Along with the two of you, the LGBTQ campus initiative, I think has been really important in moving work for me, especially working with GSA. The sense that I get from the people I know in the Gender and Sexuality Alliance, and even those outside, is that there's no real voice, centralized voice at the university speaking up for them. So even just having our monthly group that is talking about what we can do to make campus a little more welcoming and a little safer for those students, I think has an impact, because prior to this little group, they've been feeling that absence. So I've found that really moving, and appreciate PJ for corralling all of us into one Zoom last year. And another thing outside of the initiative is we piloted last year the Kira retreat for LGBTQ students, which Erica spoke at and spent the day with us. And students loved it.
Awesome.
We had 14 students. We had 13 sign up and 14 show up, which
that's
never
never.
happens in student programming.
Which I think speaks to the need for it, right? How much they want it.
Right. And folks left, saying that this was the first time that they'd been to campus ministry, never thought they could feel safe in campus ministry, but also that there had never been an event that the university had designed for them. And so we're coming back this year with an overnight off-campus Cura retreat in December 3rd through 4th.
December 3rd is an amazing day. Kings were born on that day, just so you know.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
your
Is that your
birthday.
birthday?
It's definitely my birthday.
Make a note in your calendar.
So we're excited to build on that experience from last year, and hopefully welcome a few more students and have a little more intentional time overnight on our retreat.
That's awesome.
I think Kevin is being modest, and so I'm just going to jump in and
Help
say,
him out.
right. I'm just going to jump in and highlight, first of all, how much work it takes to put together a retreat like that, like a full day of meaningful conversation and reflection and activity, time together, time apart. Like, a lot goes into that. And I think that day was really so special for those students. Like, you created a home for them. So thank you for doing that.
We.
I showed up. I showed up and did what you told me to do. So.
That's great. And also to shout out Ally Mark, campus ministry, who is our director of retreats and spiritual programs, who really helped with planning a lot of that.
Yeah.
I won't take all the credit for that.
Mark was the only, we just dubbed him, the students dubbed him Ally Mark for the day, which is amazing.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you both for the work that you are doing. It's definitely making an impact on campus, and I really appreciate working with you all, with both of you all. We know for the last, 18 months, 19 months now, the pandemic has been going on, something around there. What effects have you seen on our students within the LGBTQ plus community? Have you seen any difference? Has it affected them differently than you think other students? Any thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good question. I know one thing that impacted a lot of folks, and particularly college students, was, going back home, right? When they had to go home and try to attend classes from home, and not all of them live in welcoming, affirming spaces. Not all of them are out at home. And so I think for a lot of students, it kind of forced them back in the closet to some degree. They might have been going back to unsafe environments, and then trying to maintain those social connections or, participate in classes when they feel like they don't have kind of the space and the privacy to sort of show up how they are and develop their identity, right? This is such a period of growing into and discovering who you are. And when you go back home, with your family, sometimes it stunts the process a little bit. So I imagine folks are feeling that effect.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
And I would say, like anyone who's suffering from a lack of community during COVID and isolation, social isolation, for queer folks, chosen family is really important, and the community people build around other LGBTQ folks is really important, especially when biological family might not be as affirming. And so to be isolated, some students were on campus, some students were off campus, Zoom, no meetings, no in-person meetings for the first semester of last year. I think that probably took a toll, as it would any group that is communally based.
That's a great point that you mentioned about family and feeling at home. It's so interesting. I think about the term when folks will say like blood is thicker than water, right? I just never believe that. I just think that I would say like love is thicker than water. You know what I mean? Where that community of folks that may love you and support you, that's true family. And that's just been part of my journey that I've seen. And I'm hoping that our students are able to see that even while they're on campus. With that said, what do you think our role is as a community to support our LGBTQ students as well as faculty members and staff? What's our role? How does that look?
It's a great question. And I want to kind of jump off of what you just said too about this idea of home, right? And a sense of home and creating a sense of home and belonging for our students. Because I think that's a really crucial point that not all faculty and staff realize, is that for our LGBTQ students and also for our students of color and for our first-gen students, they don't necessarily walk onto this campus and feel at home. They don't walk onto this campus and feel like it belongs to them, like they're welcome, centered, and celebrated. So a lot of them spend 4 years working to make Fairfield their home, working to change discriminatory or exclusionary policies and practices and spaces. And I think as faculty and staff, part of our role is to look for those, find them, and change them so that the students don't have to do that work, so that they can have an equitable, college experience.
That's a great point.
Yeah. And I'm sure this happens every year or every year, but the students who are actively engaged in GSA right now are warriors. They are champions of their cause, and they do really impressive work that isn't their responsibility. That Erica's, talking about. That isn't on a student. No student should have to come here and bear the responsibility of making Fairfield a safe, welcoming home for them. So, I mean, to answer the question, what should faculty and staff do is a really difficult or large question, because we're not there. We're not. There's no centralized work being done, but even that, I think I'm stealing this from Erica from class the other day.
I just stole what I said from you,
Okay,
so
perfect.
it's fine. We're sharing.
We're sharing, unsupervised. Right, that it's everyone's responsibility.
Agree.
Right, so even if we did have as some other schools have, a center, an LGBTQ resource center, that doesn't mean the problem's over.
Very true.
Right, it's on each individual office to make sure that their programming, their space, their staff are welcoming, affirming, and can provide a home for students. So it's a tall order when asked.
There needs to be like centralized responsibility and widely distributed responsibility, both, I think. Right. So a center, like an LGBTQ center, would be amazing. And also each department in programming doing the work to make sure that they're being inclusive and affirmative.
Right. We talk about this in DEI work all the time, right?
Definitely.
It's not one person's role to make sure the university is equitable.
Definitely.
But faculty and staff could also get safe space trained, right? If
Right.
they were interested in supporting our students.
Very true.
Because we're fortunate enough that these students who come to campus and are warriors and do speak up, they give us great feedback. And so I think it's our responsibility to honor that feedback and work with it and try to affect change to that point.
Definitely. You know, what I'm hearing from you all is like, we should really embody radical hospitality,
Oh my
right?
God. Can we please?
Took
Yes.
the words right out of every
Yes.
faculty and staff mouth.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Because we have to be unconditionally welcome. Like, we should make sure that this place is a true home. We're going to say, Kev?
Yeah, just I thought back to the kickoff event to Radical Hospitality that the university had with Father James Keenan, who's a theological ethicist. And he names LGBTQ people in that talk and in his book as people who feel excluded in higher ed, amongst other groups of people. But I was sitting there, you know, snapping
Yeah.
as I was watching all my colleagues listen to this. And so you're right. It's a cornerstone of our university, and we need to be really intentional about how we put that into practice with our LGBTQ students.
Yeah. Okay. And when it comes to faculty and staff, I feel like we haven't given any specific suggestions yet other than get safe space trained. Shameless plug. But I think even just practicing continued awareness, right, that there are LGBTQ students here on campus, which I think some people may even overlook and not realize, right? That they're sometimes invisible, whether by choice or not, and to recognize that that is a part of our community, that we're a part of this community, and to start looking for how am I including people of various genders, right, and various sexual orientations in my teaching, in my service work, in my conversations with people. What assumptions am I making when I speak to a person about their gender, about the gender of their partner, right? And you know, what assumptions am I making about someone's pronouns and what they want to be called? And so just constant awareness and practice of that, and seeking resources to become more comfortable in those conversations.
Definitely. You know, I'm glad you said pronouns. I know I've shared with you all before that I didn't understand the significance before going through safe space training and before having conversations with different folks, where I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to embody radical hospitality, right? So if I'm truly embodying this, why shouldn't I put my pronouns up to make someone else know that I'm an ally and I'm here to welcome you here on campus? I think sometimes people don't realize just the significance of just putting your pronouns up. You know, I on Zoom, right? I'm like, what harm are you causing? Is this causing harm for you to put your pronouns up to let someone else know, listen, I'm here for you? Is any, I mean, do you all want to emphasize, is there any more to that people feel when it comes to when they see that?
Well, I would add, you know, the other thing, I mean, one thing it does signal, right, is that I'm somebody that maybe is a safe person for you to have a conversation with, like, because I'm aware of the importance of pronouns, or I'm aware that you can't always know a person's pronouns just by looking at them, which is a common response. Well, shouldn't you just know by looking at me? And no, we don't always know, and that's why it's important to ask. I think the other thing it does when more people make it a regular practice to share pronouns is that we normalize that we may not know what a person's pronouns are. And we normalize the sharing of pronouns. So for somebody who may be misgendered or may often, you know, have the wrong pronouns used for them, as they share it, they're not the only person in the room doing that. Definitely. So we kind of all normalize that. And I'll call me and Kevin out for not sharing our pronouns at the beginning of this podcast, right?
Can we edit that?
No, I think here's where we own up to our mistake,
Yeah,
right? Which is another big part of the safe space training.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is owning our mistakes, that we're going to keep making them and we have to clean it up, right? So my pronouns are she and her.
Mine are he and him.
Mine are he and him.
Great. Thanks everybody
we
for
go.
letting me know.
Yeah.
The thing that we also emphasize too is not requiring people to share pronouns, right?
Yes.
So I invited you to, and you're welcome to.
Mm-hmm.
But we also want to make sure that we don't force everyone to share, because that might put, a trans or non-binary person in an uncomfortable position of outing themselves, and they might not be ready.
Great point. Great point.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of cisgendered folks,
Kevin, what does that mean?
cisgendered, it means
Glad you asked.
yeah, when your gender identity matches your sex assigned at birth.
Okay.
Right, it's a place of privilege to be cisgendered, and a lot of cis folks are either nervous about pronouns, uncomfortable. But I think it goes back to what Erica was saying about constant awareness, right? When people use the wrong pronouns, cis folks use the wrong pronouns of someone who uses other pronouns, they tense up, they don't know what to do, and
Over apologize,
and suddenly it becomes this big thing, and then they feel bad, but then they want the reassurance that it's okay. There's a lot of anxiety around it for a lot of cis folks, but the constant awareness to say, that I'm going to try and do this, I'm going to try and get it right, I'm committing to getting it right. If I screw up, we correct it and move on.
Yeah.
And there's no harm there. There's no harm. There's more harm in making a big deal out of it and being anxious about it and uncomfortable with it.
Right. Well, because there might be harm. Like, you may have done harm, but don't make it worse
dwell on
by
it.
making it all about you.
Yeah.
Right? Clean it up and move forward and do better. Yeah.
That's great.
But speaking about radical hospitality and what can we do, particularly around pronouns and constantly checking our assumptions, something that I like to practice and that a lot of institutions actually normalize is using they and them to refer to people before you know their pronouns. So not making an assumption about what someone's pronouns are and just referring to somebody as they and them until you learn, from them, from their email signature, their Zoom name, what their pronouns are, and then using them, appropriately. And so when you do that, it reminds us that we don't know. And it's a good way to avoid causing harm to somebody by mispronouncing them.
Who inspires you all? Is there anyone that people should know, even if it's like social media wise, that people can follow, or books that folks may be willing to read that you always suggest? Any social media influencers?
Oh my gosh. You know how old we are?
I think we're all around in the same range. I think so. We won't talk about that now.
One person that I follow that I always like to recommend is, and I'm going to mess their name up, but it's Alok V. Menom, I think, right? They're non-binary and just do a lot of writing and speaking about gender and our assumptions about gender. They also do talk a lot about fashion and how fashion is gendered and should be kind of degendered. And I find their posts just to be very thought-provoking and critical. And so if you're looking for a place to be continually checking on your own assumptions, I think that's a great start.
Awesome.
I also, in my classes, have students read Janet Mock's memoir. She's got 2 now.
Bam.
Did you recommend that to PJ?
No, PJ has read it.
Oh, okay.
We did a book club. That was one of our books.
Did you?
Yes,
okay,
yes.
so
very interesting read.
Yeah. So her first memoir is Redefining Realness, and that's the one that looks at kind of her journey from childhood.
That's the one we read. Yep.
Yeah, into adulthood. And I always have students read it. One, because I think it's just important for us to get in touch with different stories.
Yes.
Just hear different stories of different experiences, different lives. And I think it creates that more emotional heart connection rather than thinking about, a population that's very distant or a statistic. And she's a beautiful writer.
Yes.
And incredibly vulnerable and courageous in that book, and hits on so many different issues and events in her life that I think anybody can identify with something that she's gone through. And she so eloquently talks about the intersection of her different identities and, adds in facts and research in a way that doesn't feel teaching,
Yep.
right? It's just part of her story. And I think that's a good place to start too.
You know, I would just echo that. I know after reading that book, I definitely gained a greater understanding of people's experience. And it allowed me to become more empathetic with understanding Janet's story. And even, I mean, they talk about family. They talk about, so many different challenges of them learning about who they are and their journey. So, yeah, I echo that. That was a great read for me to understand someone's journey. So,
Awesome.
definitely. Kev.
Social media is not my forte, I say on a podcast. No, I'm sure
Hashtag
we'll
unsupervised.
Yeah. Hashtag unsupervised. Hashtag ancient, I think. So I have a few people who inspire me to do the work, but they're not necessarily famous people who I follow.
That's perfectly fine.
I won't name them, but GSA, the folks on GSA who I've known for the last 3 or 4 years now, who are seniors, some have recently graduated, they make me want to do better.
That's right.
Here at Fairfield. Because they're kind, caring, really brilliant, and just deserve a little more of home here from us. So they inspire me to do the work here. One of my favorite human beings on earth is Sister Janine Gramick, who 50 years ago, she's a Catholic nun, started an LGBTQ ministry in the Catholic Church, and it survives today. New Ways Ministry. I do follow them. I do follow them, and I think folks should too. If folks are wondering about issues affecting LGBTQ folks in the Catholic Church or Catholic issues affecting LGBTQ people, New Ways Ministry is the place to go. Erica inspires
Stop
me.
it.
I know I have to be nice.
Lies.
Erica inspires me to do the work. I told her last year that the first time I met her was admired her from a distance.
Gotcha.
Was in an RJSJ, Racial Justice and Social Justice meeting, like my first week at Fairfield. And she made some boss comment in the meeting that I was.
She is a boss.
She's a boss.
She's a boss, definitely.
And I was like,
In my own mind.
I was like, someday I'll be friends with that person, you know? And so I've admired her for 4.5 years. And
She's admirable.
Yeah. And getting to work with her has been a real treat.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
I can't believe
Man.
it took this long. For us to become like friends and colleagues and like in this fight together. I'm glad. I'm glad we're here now.
Me too.
I thought you meant like, I'm glad it took this long for you to finally say that, Kevin.
Me too.
No, I'm sorry it took this long.
I'll be
For us to
thinking
have
about
this
that line.
relationship.
I'll be
Yeah.
thinking about that for days
I'll
now.
stop it.
Man, this is awesome. Well, I have another question for you all. And, I like to end on something sweet. With that said, what is your favorite candy or dessert?
Peanut butter pie.
Decadence.
Frozen whipped decadence. I've actually never had Kevin's peanut butter pie, and I don't think I will, since I've learned that it contains a lot of dairy.
The secret
It
ingredients.
contains a lot of dairy, and dairy is not my friend. But now that I've said that, I feel like my favorite dessert is probably ice cream, but non-dairy ice cream,
Okay.
like
What's the
oat
best?
milk. I think oat milk is.
Have you ever had Nadamu?
I actually haven't tried that yet. But
Whole Foods.
okay, but is it non-dairy
Are we
or is
allowed
it
to-
just
are we allowed to
lactose free?
It's non-dairy. It's
Okay.
coconut milk.
Oh, I'm into coconut milk too.
Okay. What flavor though of ice cream though?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm particular.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like fruit flavors or things that are overly complicated. Like I want some maybe vanilla, some chocolate, some peanut butter.
Mm-hmm.
You can throw some cookie crumbles in there maybe, but nothing like crazier than that.
They say your favorite dessert describes, your personality.
I'm a little
No, sure.
nutty, a little nutty, but not fruity.
They say whoever they is, right?
Yeah, yeah. The authorities.
Kevin.
Well, if the dessert has to define me, then it would be like bran. Go
Stop
bran.
it.
Come on, Kevin.
Stop it.
Something stale. No, I also can't do dairy.
See, we're soulmates.
Or gluten.
Oh,
So that makes dessert very difficult.
This is hilarious. You make peanut butter pie, but you
you
don't
can't eat it at all.
That's what everyone tells me it's delicious.
Okay, can I just interrupt you before you tell us your dessert? Because I know what your new favorite dessert is,
Great.
which is the chocolate cream pie that I make for Thanksgiving every year, which is dairy-free and gluten-free.
Well, there you go.
It has a pretzel crust.
Oh.
A gluten-free pretzel crust.
Yep.
Let's have a pie off.
Okay.
Which
Deal.
neither of us can eat my pie.
Yeah, but we
you
can both eat my pie.
automatically
We could have a panel of people without dietary restrictions and have them eat both pies,
Sure.
and then tell us what they think.
I would say, oh gosh, I don't even know. Like, okay, around Christmas, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna eat the gluten. I'm gonna eat the dairy.
But what is it?
Right, everything that my mom makes.
Which is what? Give us an example.
Okay, so my grandmother was an excellent baker. My mom bakes everything that she baked. So she makes really good almond horn cookies.
Oh, okay.
They're like a butter almond cookie that will just melt in your mouth.
Oh.
Like it can close my eyes and
There's a lot of
Taste it.
butter in those cookies. I've made them.
Yes.
Yeah.
lots of dairy.
Just so we know. Just so you're clear.
Yes.
Yeah. What other cookies?
Um,
Cookies.
She makes really good fruit cake.
No.
Mm,
No way.
I
That's not a
swear to
thing.
you. I swear to you.
Really?
Yes, I'll bring some.
Fascinating. I don't know if I want it.
And you do want it.
Okay.
It's more cakey than like hard bready.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother used to call it like a spiced water cake,
Okay.
but people call it fruit cake because there's like cherries and walnuts and
All right.
raisins inside.
Can we make it a spiced rum cake? Then you have my attention.
Let's edit that out. on hashtag on supervised.
Oh,
So what is the final decision, Kevin? I'm just going to make sure that.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
we gotta
I
lock
didn't
this
come up. I would say my grandmother's almond horns
Love it.
Awesome.
cookies. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, great. Great.
What about you, PJ?
Man. I would call myself an ice cream connoisseur as well. But I like dairy ice cream.
Well, sure. Well, sure. I would too if I could digest it.
The good stuff. He likes the good stuff.
I'm not discriminating against cows, okay?
But I've been doing a lot of froyo lately. But
What flavor?
That's still dairy.
what You're right. It's definitely still
People
dairy.
say that to me all the time. Oh, you can't eat dairy? What about frozen yogurt?
Oh my god. No, they have non-dairy fro. Well, no,
They
it's not
do.
considered froyo then, right? It's like
They do have non-dairy frozen yogurt, but like try finding some.
16
not-
handles.
Oh, all right. Well, there.
Put the plug in.
Where else? What's your favorite flavor?
Great question. No one's ever asked me this question back, so I
You
wasn't really-
asked it.
I know, but
And you specifically asked what flavor.
know.
So
I know.
thought you'd be prepared.
I'm prepared.
Okay.
Here we go.
I was born ready.
Here we go.
I'll give one of my favorite flavors.
Okay.
Cake batter. It's delicious.
No. It's too sweet. It's
But
too sweet.
you know, I grew up and grandma would make cakes and the cake batter would be there and before we knew it was unhealthy because of the eggs and whatever folks say.
It's fine.
So cake batter that's my favorite right now.
Okay.
Right now. That may
now.
change.
Mhm.
But well, I think we can start our own dessert show and reviews,
Yeah. A cooking show.
Scripture and
Cooking show,
dessert.
Scripture. Oh.
Scripture and dessert.
Those are our two
I can
podcasts
only
so far.
contribute to one of those topics.
And you have a lot to learn.
Don't worry, I don't know about making dessert so much,
Okay,
so
okay.
we'll work it out. That's
All right. Between the three of us, we have
Yeah.
everything we need.
that's another podcast, right? Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you all so much. And you know what? I really like a lot of what everyone said, but I really want to just highlight our responsibility as a community to ensure that we are making Fairfield University a home for everyone, for our students as well as guests, as well as families, right? And I just want to leave with the comment that just came up while we were talking that truly love is thicker than water, right? We're truly a Fairfield community, a Fairfield family. Let's continue to do this great work. Thank you all so much, and I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you,
Thank you.
PJ.